Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first lesson. Today, we're going to go through the first lesson in the Spotlight on Literature C, which is the literary section, the story or the short story, Searching for Summer, written by the author, John Aiken. So, but I wanted to know, how are you feeling? How are you today? Have you had breakfast yet? Hello, good morning.
Morning, teacher.
How
Hello,
are you?
teacher.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm doing well. Have you had breakfast yet?
No, in this moment, no.
Oh,
Later.
it's too early right now. You're not hungry.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing. So like I said, today we have a couple of things to do. We're going to go through the first lesson of the year. And I want you to please help me out reading some stuff and responding some questions. And we're going to start in this moment. I'm going to show you what we're doing right now. There we go. So if you have your books, I recommend you to open them to page 10 on your Spotlights on Literature C. Pages from 10 to 15. We will try to read the story today, but I'm gonna give you some intro because I think that it's important to understand the stories through studying a little bit about the author and some previous context, especially because this story has been influenced by a historical event that everybody, or at least everybody, should know about, and you will see it. So like I said, we're gonna go over some author's insights. Then we're gonna talk a little bit about the characters of the story, then the summary of the plot, and finally we're gonna listen and read the story. I'm gonna send you the audio. I did send you a couple of weeks ago. I'm gonna share it right now on the chat. So if you don't have the book, you may have, there it is. So can you see the chat? So there's the link that is gonna lead you to the audio. We're gonna listen it in class, but it's important for you to have it just in case that you wanna listen many times or different times at different moments. So you have them available there in the chat so you can copy in another document. Let's see, we're gonna listen and read the story and then we're gonna discuss the plot summary, because if I let you know what is going on, you see, spoiler alert is not accepted in this class, and you won't read if I tell you what the details or the particulars of this story are. And there's always important to discuss a couple of things related to values, to moral values, religious values. And today it is the time, it is the opportunity to talk a little bit about the school tagline. Good morning, everybody who is reading in the chat. So you're all familiar with the tagline or the school motto that says men and women for others. And you're so familiar with it because you used to sing it every day at the beginning of the journey. And also you can see it in hashtags on the different social networks we have available for you. And now it is time to analyze it a little bit. You can see on the picture the hashtag in Spanish, siempre más para los demás. Like I said, you are so familiar with it. And also I translated into English. Maybe it's not so familiar to you because this is the first time that I'm seeing them translated. I took my time and I just translated into English, which is something easy. Always more for others. So now we're gonna discuss a little bit, 3 or 4 opinions about what these words mean to you. What these words mean to you. How can you make this alive? How can you apply to make it applicable in daily life? So 2 or 3 opinions, please, about the meaning of this tagline or hashtag or motto. Please, anybody. Good morning, planet Earth,
Good
calling ninth
morning.
graders. Hi, thank you, Laura. Laura, right?
Yes,
Okay, thank you very much.
we have to help other people when they need, because in moments when we need help, those persons can help us just for being grateful. So we have to be kind and gentle to the persons they are around us.
All right, thank you very much. Excellent participation. Laura, what you said is true. I mean, you have to remember these words, what goes around comes around. So if you treat people with kindness, this is the treatment you will receive at the end. You see, it's like I said, what goes around comes around. Everything you do comes back, and sometimes doubled. Thank you, Laura. Anybody else? You see, it's not difficult. Just don't
It's
be
true.
ashamed. Thank you, Melanie.
Yes,
Please.
and help our friends when they are going through a difficult situation.
Mhm. Are you a good friend, Melanie? Do you consider yourself a good friend?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So this is important. You gotta help your friends in need. Otherwise, you don't deserve to call yourself a friend if you're not dealt to help. Because sometimes you got friends just when for recreational purposes. And this is not a friend. This is an acquaintance or anything else but a friend. So I think that you have to leave the zone of comfort. You have to leave your zone of comfort and go out and see who needs you. It's not like you're gonna do something different. You can help in your routine. I mean, and this motto, it was written by a philosophy of helping from your profession. I mean, you are getting ready, you are preparing yourself to become doctors, lawyers, so professionals in society. And then one day you're gonna give all of that back. So you have to give everything that you got back to society. And this is what this word mean. I don't know if anybody else wants to say something else. Time for one more opinion. Let me see. Data says we must always help other people because sooner or later we will need the help of another. Since the world turns 1,000 times, and maybe now we can help somebody, but maybe tomorrow we will need the help of that person we helped. Excellent. And sometimes data, you don't receive help exactly from the person that you have helped before. Help comes anywhere from anywhere. But what you said is it's it's reality. You see, because sooner or later we will need help. We always need help. Thank you very much for your participations in the chat as well. So now let's move to the topic. Like I said, the spotlights on literature C. The author note that's the woman who wrote the story we're gonna read in a couple of minutes is John Aiken. Let's read a little bit about this remarkable woman. Anybody who help me out, please, reading that information out loud, please.
I can.
Thank you, Fatima.
John Aiken was. I'm sorry, I can't see. John Aiken was one of the most loved and noted English writers who specialized in writing supernatural thrillers and charmingly idiosyncratic children's novels. She was given with the prestigious title of Most Excellent Daughter of the British Empire (MBE) for her contributions in the field of children's literature. Additionally, she was also conferred with Guardian Children's Fiction Prize and Edgar Allan Poe Award.
Thank you so much. Excellent. So before I continue with this, I want to read, Gustavo said, we need to be the best on different areas because our parents are paying our studies. Those are in other level, in the way we need to be the best to help others to be better. All right, excellent opinion, Gustavo. Is there something wrong with your microphone today, Gustavo? Because you always unmuted.
No, teacher.
Ah, okay, you wanted to read.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so what we read is this. John Aiken, believe it or not, well, it's not the first time that I hear about this woman, but she's not as famous as other authors, but it's because her popularity went around England, and she was awarded many times with the with the Guardian Children's Prize and also the Edgar Allan Poe Award. I mean, her career was remarkable, even though we didn't have any idea that she existed until now. And it's maybe because we're not really into literature, especially because, like I said in here, she specialized in children's stories. So then let's move something about her family. Anybody who wants to help me out, please? Please, please, please.
Can I do it?
Of course, Valeria.
Born to British writer Conrad Aiken, Sejong Joan developed a knack for storytelling, which only bettered with time. Having completed her formal education, she turned to writing children's novels and fiction stories at a young age. In her lifetime, she wrote on various genres, including magic, fantasy, adventures, and thriller. Wow. In total, she came up with almost 92 novels, including 27 novels for adults, as well as plays, short stories, and poems. Her most famous classic, The Wolves of the Wallaby Chase, one of the come magnum opus of her career. Following the super success of the novel, she penned a series under it.
Thank you so much. Well read, well read. So let me see. This woman has been writing, well, had been writing because she's dead now. She had been writing since she was very young. And it says that she became better with time. So sometimes you feel that you have a knack. All of us have a knack. And sometimes you said, no, but I'm not so good at this, so I'm gonna stop doing it. I will stop practicing. So don't get disappointed. So don't get down every time that you feel that you have the passion of doing something and maybe the things don't go exactly what you expected. But this woman was an example. She set an example for new generations. She started very young, writing stories, and she became better with time. And at the end of her life, she wrote more than 100 books, 92 novels, and 27 they were for adults, not just for children, even though that was her specialty. Okay, so you see that this woman has lived a very successful career when she was alive. And before to read the story, you need to know some previous information about it so you can understand that better, because this story is full of signs. It's full of signs. Everything that has been mentioned there has a truth behind. So she's using some metaphorical images to say something, and maybe you say, why a yellow wedding dress instead of a white one, or a different color? What does the sunlight mean in the story? And you will understand why, because of what influenced her was something that really happened in the history of humankind. So anybody who help me with the background, please? It's very short.
I can
Sure, thank you.
a background to a story. Nuclear accident Aiken wrote. Summer in
Nine-
1950 and set the story in a future 8 times. Paragraph the 1980 of
2080s.
2080
Mhm.
when the story was published. Nuclear disaster was a ever-present threat. New nuclear weapons were being tested and radioactive clouds rained down from the polluting the everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that's why she wrote this story, because the series of the story is a dark place with no sun. So when everything was dark, so everything was dark. And she came to believe that, or why it come that she started thinking about that possible threat, is because the nuclear bombs that were dropped in Japan at the end of the Second World War. Nuclear anxiety aching wrote session for summer in the 1950s, but she was thinking in the future. I mean, the 80s for her was, or were, the future, 30 years later. And some people said that probably she was referring to the 1980s or the 2080s, because she didn't precise the date. She just said the 80s can be in any century possible. When the story was published, when she published the story in the 50s, nuclear disaster was a present threat. Well, it is still an ever-present threat, because we live in a constant fear that one day United States or Russia or Korea are gonna start a nuclear war. So this is a ever-present threat. Like she was facing that reality, because years before, the United States dropped a bomb in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Actually, there were two bombs, right? And you know the story, the history of this. All right, so this is the summary, but we're not gonna read it right now because I want you to read the story along with the audio. Like I said, we're gonna listen it today. You're gonna read it along. If you don't have the books, just pay close attention. Eventually, I'm gonna give you more details about the story. And also, I shared the link with you, and I'm gonna do it again. So you can have access to it every time you want to listen to the story. Now get ready for this. Can you listen to the audio?
No, teacher.
And
No,
now?
No,
teacher.
And now?
No yet. No, teacher.
Okay, wait a second. And now?
Searching for Summer by Joan Aiken.
Yes.
Okay,
Lily
thank
wore
you.
yellow on her wedding day. In the 80s, people put a lot of faith in omens and believed that if a bride's dress was yellow, her married life would be blessed with a bit of sunshine. It was years since the bombs had been banned, but still the cloud never lifted. Whitish gray day after day, sometimes darkening to a weeping slate color or, at the end of an evening, turning to smoky copper. Secretively brooded. Old people began their stories with a classic fairy tale opening. Long, long ago when I was a little un, in the days when the sky was blue. And children, listening, chuckled among themselves at the absurd thought. Because blue, imagine it! How could the sky ever have been blue? You might as well say, in the days when the grass was pink. Stars, rainbows, and all other such heavenly sideshows had been permanently withdrawn, and if the radio announced that there was a blink of sunshine in such and such a place, where the cloud belt had thinned for half an hour, cars and buses would pour in that direction for days in an unavailing search for warmth and light. After the wedding, when all the relations were standing on the church porch, with Lily shivering prettily in her buttercup nylon, her father prodded the dour and withered grass on a grave, although it was August, the leaves were hardly out yet, and said, "Well, Tom, what are you aiming to do now, eh?" "Going to find a bit of sun and have our honeymoon in it," said Tom. There was a general laugh from the wedding party. "Don't get sunburned," shrilled Aunt Nancy. "We'll come back brown as this grass," said Tom, and ignoring the good-natured teasing from their respective families, the two young people mounted on their scooter, which stood ready at the churchyard wall, and chugged away in a shower of golden confetti. Tom and Lily buzzed on hopefully across the gray countryside, with Lily's veil like a gilt banner floating behind. It was chilly going for her in her wedding things, but the sight of a bride was supposed to bring good luck, and so she stuck it out, although her fingers were blue to the knuckles. Every now and then they switched on their portable radio and listened to the forecast. Inverness had seen the sun for 10 minutes yesterday, and Southend for 5 minutes this morning, but that was all. Tom had lost some of his bounce and confidence. Every place they passed through looked nastier than the last, partly on account of the dismal light, partly because people had given up bothering to take pride in their burrows. And then just as they were entering a village called Molesworth, the dimmest, drabbest, most insignificant huddle of houses they came to yet, the engine coughed and died on them. "Can't see what's wrong," said Tom, after a prolonged and gloomy survey. "Oh, Tom," Lily was almost crying. "What'll we do?" "Have to stop here for the night, s'pose." Tom was short-tempered with frustration. "Look, there's a garage just up the road. We can push the bike there and they'll tell us if there's a pub where we can stay. It's nearly 6 anyway." They had taken the bike to the garage, and the man there was just telling them that the only pub in the village was the Rising Sun, where Mr. Noakes might be able to give them a bed, when a bus pulled up in front of the petrol pumps. "Look," the garage owner said, "there's Mr. Noakes just getting out of the bus now. Sid," he called. But Mr. Noakes was not able to come to them at once. 2 old people were climbing slowly out of the bus ahead of him. A blind man with a white stick, a withered old lady in a black satin dress and hat. "Careful now, George," she was saying. "Mindy be careful with my son, William." "I'm being careful, Mrs. Hatching," the conductor said patiently, as he almost lifted the unsteady old pair off the bus platform. The driver had stopped his engine, and everyone on the bus was taking a mild and sympathetic interest, except for Mr. Noakes just behind, who was cursing irritably at the delay. "Old nuisances," Mr. Noakes said furiously. "Wasting public time. Every week that palaver goes on. Taking the old man to Midwick Hospital outpatients and back again. I know what I'd do with 'em. Put to sleep, that sort oughta be." Mr. Noakes was a repulsive-looking individual, but when he heard that Tom and Lily wanted a room for the night, he changed completely and gave them a leer that was full of false goodwill. He was a big, red-faced man with wet, full lips, bulging, pale gray bloodshot eyes, and a crop of stiff, greasy black hair. He wore tennis shoes. Lily stooped and picked up something from the pavement. They followed Mr. Noakes glumly up the street to the Rising Sun. While they were eating their baked beans, Mr. Noakes stood over their table grimacing at them. Lily unwisely confided to him that they were looking for a bit of sunshine. Mr. Noakes's laughter nearly shook down the ramshackle building. "Sunshine? Oh, my God! That's a good un, hear that, Mother?" he bawled to his wife. "They're looking for a bit of sunshine." "Why," he said, banging on the table till the baked beans leaped about, "if I could find a bit of sunshine near here, permanent bit that is, d'you know what I'd do? Trailer site, country club, holiday camp. You wouldn't know the place. Land around here is dirt cheap. I'd buy up the lot. I'd advertise. I'd have people flocking to this little dump from all over the country. But what a hope, eh? Well, feeling better? Enjoyed your tea? Bed's ready for you." Avoiding one another's eyes, Tom and Lily stood up. I'd like to go for a bit of a walk first, Tom," Lily said in a small voice. "Look, I picked up that old lady's bag on the pavement. I didn't notice it till we'd done talking to Mr. Noakes, and by then she was out of sight. Should we take it back to her?" "Good idea," said Tom, pouncing on the suggestion with relief. "Do you know where she lives, Mr. Noakes?" "Who? Old Ma Hatching? Sure, I know. She lives in the wood. But you don't want to go taking her bag back. Not this time of the evening, you don't. Let her worry. She'll come asking for it in the morning." "She walked so slowly," said Lily, holding the bag gently in her hands. It was very old, made of black velvet on 2 ring handles and embroidered with beaded roses. "I think we ought to take it to her, don't you, Tom?" "Oh, very well, have it your own way," Mr. Noakes said, winking at Tom. "Take that path by the garage. You can't go wrong. I've never been there myself, but they live somewhere in that wood back of the village. You'll find it soon enough." They found the path soon enough, but not the cottage. Under the lowering sky, they walked forward endlessly among trees that carried only tiny and rudimentary leaves, wizened and poverty-stricken. Lily was still wearing her wedding sandals, which had begun to blister. She held on to Tom's arm, biting her lip with the pain, and he looked down miserably at her bent brown head. Everything had turned out so differently from what he had planned. Hardly noticing the cottage garden, beyond a vague impression of rows of runner beans, they made for the clematis-grown porch and knocked. "Me dear," it was the old lady, old Mrs. Hatching, who opened the door, and her exclamation was a long-drawn gasp of pleasure and astonishment. "Me dear, 'tis the pretty bride. Seed ye's afternoon when we was coming home from hospital. Come in, me dears." "We brought back your bag," Tom said, putting it in her hands, "and we wondered if you'd have a bit of plaster you could kindly let us have. My wife's hurt her foot." My wife. Even in the midst of Mrs. Hatching's voluble welcome, the strangeness of these words struck the 2 young people, and they fell quiet, each of them pondering, while Mrs. Hatching thanked and commiserated all in a breath, and asked them to take a seat on the sofa and fetched a basin of water from the scullery. And William, from his seat in the chimney corner, demanded to know what it was all about. "Now us'll have a cup of tea, eh? Proper thirsty you'm fair to be, walkin' all the way here in this hot day." Hot day? Tom and Lily stared at each other, and then around the room. Then it was true? It was not their imagination that a great dusty golden square of sunshine laid on the fireplace wall, where the brass pendulum of the clock at every swing blinked into sudden brilliance? That the blazing geraniums on the windowsill housed a drove of murmuring bees? That through the window the gleam of linen hung in the sun to whiten suddenly dazzled their eyes? "The sun! Is it really the sun?" Tom said, almost doubtfully. "And why not?" Mrs. Hatching demanded. "How else'll beans set? Tell me that. Fine thing if sun were to stop shining." Chuckling to herself, she set out a Crown Derby tea set, gorgeously colored in red and gold, and a baking of saffron buns. The tea was tawny and hot and sweet. The clock's tick was like a bird chirping. Lily looked sleepily around the little room, so rich and peaceful, and thought, I wish we were staying here. I wish we needn't go back to that horrible pub. She leaned against Tom's comforting arm. Look at the sky, she whispered to him. Out there, between the geraniums. Blue. And he'll come up and see my spare bedroom, won't he now? Mrs. Hatching said, breaking off the thread of her questions, which indeed was not a thread, but merely a savouring of her pleasure and astonishment at this unlooked-for visit. Bide here, why don't he? Mid as well, the little un's fair wore out. Us'll do for 'ee better and rangy old Noakes. Proper old scoundrel he be, won't us, William? A sight of the spare room settled any doubts. The great white bed, huge as a prairie, built up with layer upon solid layer of mattress, blanket, and quilt, almost filled the little shadowy room in which it stood. Brass rails shone in the green dimness. Isn't it quiet? Lily whispered. Mrs. Hatching, silent for the moment, stood looking at them proudly, her bright eyes slowly moving from face to face. And so, almost without any words, the matter was decided. 3 days later they remembered that they must go to the village and collect the scooter, which must surely be mended by now. They had been helping old William pick a basket full of beans. Tom had taken his shirt off, and the sun gleamed on his brown back. Lily was wearing an old cotton print, which Mrs. Hatching, with much chuckling, had shortened to fit her. Tom and Lily, even on the 3rd day, were still stopping every other minute to exclaim over the blueness of the sky. At night, they sat on the back doorstep while Mrs. Hatching clucked inside as she dished the supper. Starstruck he'll be. Come along in, do ye, before soup's cold. Stars niver run away yet as I do know. She waved to them and stood watching as they walked into the wood, thin and frail beyond belief, but wiry, indomitable, her eyes full of zest. Then she turned to scream menacingly at a couple of pullets that had strayed and were scratching among the potatoes. Almost at once they noticed, as they followed the path, that the sky was clouded over. It is only there on that one spot, Lily said in wonder, and they've never even noticed that the sun doesn't shine in other places. That's how it must have been all over the world once, Tom said. At the garage, they found their scooter ready and waiting. They were about to start back when they ran into Mr. Noakes. "Well, well, well," he shouted, glaring at them with ferocious good humor. "How many wells make a river, eh? But hello, what's this? Brown, eh? Suntan? Scrumptious," he said. "Where'd you get it, eh?" "That wasn't all got in half an hour, I know. Come on, this means money to you and me. Tell us the big secret. Remember what I said. Land around these parts is dirt cheap." Tom and Lily looked at each other in horror. They thought of the cottage, the bees humming among the runner beans, the sunlight glinting in the red and gold teacups. At night, when they had lain in the huge sagging bed, stars had shone through the window, and the whole wood was as quiet as inside of a shell. "Oh, we've been miles from here," Tom lied hurriedly. "We ran into a friend and he took us right away beyond Brinsley." And Mr. Noakes still looked suspicious and unsatisfied. Tom did the only thing possible. "We're going back there now," he said. "The sunbathing's grand," and opening the throttle, he let the scooter go. They waved at Mr. Noakes and chugged off toward the gray hills that lay to the north. "My wedding dress," Lily said sadly. "It's on our bed." They wondered how long Mr. Hatching would keep tea hot for them. Who would eat all the pasties? "Never mind, you won't need it again," Tom comforted her. At least, he thought, They had left the golden place undisturbed. Mr. Noakes never went into the wood, and they had done what they intended. They had found the sun. Now they too would be able to tell their grandchildren when beginning a story. Long, long ago, when we were young, in the days when the sky was blue,
All right, this is the end of the story. I hope that you have enjoyed it. You have read and listened at the same time, and we're gonna continue talking about this story next class because there are a lot of details that we need to discuss. So the story will be understood by everybody. But I think that the language was comprehensible, was easy to get. And if you have any questions, we're gonna try to solve them next class. Right now, there is one subject, there is one theme in which the story goes around, and it is taking things for granted. I'm gonna write it in the chat. Take something for granted. So now my question is, so look at the chat and respond this question. What do you take for granted in your life? What do you take for granted in your everyday life? 2 or 3 opinions, or if you have any questions about a question, you can ask. Hello, are you still there? Or did you fall asleep?
Yes, teacher.
You are asleep. Okay, Eric, tell me, what do you take for granted?
What?
What do you take for granted? When you take things for granted, like you can see in the chat, is when you assume that something is going to be there forever and you undervalue it because of that. I mean, you are so sure that something is there and it always be there, and you undervalue the things. So my question is, what do you take for granted in life?
Mm, oof.
Because you are so sure that you always have that thing and you don't mm, care much about it.
I think that, nah, how do you say, no todo estaría acá?
How do you say what? Sorry?
No todo estará para siempre.
Not everything is gonna, well, nothing lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever.
I think that nothing lasts be forever
Mm-hmm.
because in one moment we are gonna go,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that. But yes, sometimes it's important to
Mm-hmm.
have something important in life.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're totally right. And sometimes we undervalue things because we assume that they won't go. For example, water. Water. Every time, well, I don't know what is the water situation in your neighborhoods, but every time that you open the faucet, you have running water. And you assume that water is going to be there. So every time that you switch on the switch, you switch the lights on, so the light is going to be there, and you don't pay too much thought on that. And you said, and you take the things for granted. This is what it really means. So in the story, the characters took the sunlight, the sun, for granted, because they say the sun is gonna be there forever, or at least in our lifetimes. So it's never going away. So they take them for granted. So anybody else here wants to tell me what do you think of this question? I mean, what do you take for granted in your life?
I think something we often take for granted is people. For
Mhm.
example, our relatives, we like picture them in many stages of our lives,
Mhm.
but death is just like inevitable and just like that can happen every day.
Mhm.
So we should appreciate them, and also our friends could go anyway, stop talking to us. So yeah, people.
Hey, excellent, excellent. So you take people for granted, your parents and sometimes some friends, and that happens when you know that that person or those people really love you. When you know, when you are so sure that people love you, you take them for granted and you start undervalue these people who are really important in your life. Excellent participation. Anybody else? Because this is what the story is about, taking things for granted. Anyone else? It's almost time to your break. So one more participation and I'll let you go. So you can enjoy your snack or your breakfast. Please, one more. Maybe Gustavo. Gustavo, you are being so quiet today.
Sorry, teacher. It is because I want to listen to my classmates.
Excellent. Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Me too. Me too, Gustavo. Believe me. Believe me.
No, teacher, no problem.
All right. So Aguilar, you unmute the
Yeah,
microphone. Do you want to say something?
I think we have to enjoy all the things that give us because nothing is forever. The family and their friends are the most important.
Yeah, you're totally right. And listen to your classmates' participation. Nothing lasts forever. Everything is gonna end one day or another. So you have to value things every day and every time. Don't forget that. Don't take things for granted. This is my advice. William, you're gonna say something? Do you want to say something, don't you? No. Okay, so guys, it's time to your break. So enjoy yourself. See you tomorrow. We're gonna continue talking about the story because I want you to understand every detail, every event that is going on. Thank you very much, my friends. Excellent participations. You are very clever students. Have a nice morning.
Thank you, teacher. Have
Thank
Bye,
you,
a great
teacher.
day.
Thank you,
teacher.
Bye.
Have a
teacher.
great